Welcome. I'm excited to introduce Erica Malo this morning. Erica is the External Relations and Social Media Coordinator for MSU Extension. She's kind of one of our chief storytellers. So you may be asking yourself, what does storytelling have to do with leadership? We're about to find out. So Erica, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Katie, and thanks for inviting me here today. I'm really excited to talk to such a diverse audience across Montana about storytelling and how you all can utilize it in your daily and professional lives. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right. First off, I want everybody to think about the last time you were captivated by a story. This can be a movie, book, podcast, or a conversation. What were the things that drew you in? Did it happen right away? Or were you slowly drawn in with the story? How did that story grab your attention and keep you engaged? The sayings spin a yarn and weave a tale are used to describe storytelling. I love these sayings, not only because I'm a fiber artist, but because they show how a good story is multidimensional. If a part is missing, there's going to be a gap in the fabric, or the yarn could fall apart. You might be asking yourself, why storytelling? Why is storytelling a part of this webinar? A good story can help leaders connect to others. You can build relationships with a story. It can help you secure donations, and it can help people see new viewpoints. It can help you, your business, your organization be memorable. There are many ways to tell a story. Stories can be hours long. Think about watching a movie. It can be a 30-second elevator pitch, or it could even be a piece of artwork. Once you start thinking about stories like this, you will see them everywhere. Each and every one of you are already storytellers because we use it every day, even when we're not aware. So storytelling is a fundamental part of being human. It is the cultural practice of sharing stories with others. People construct internal narratives or stories to help make sense of the world. We do this inside ourselves all the time. They help us see the world. They let us share information in a way that creates an emotional connection. Stories help us understand information and each other. And they can come in many formats, like I was talking about earlier, oral, digital, written, and art. My husband is a musician, and each of his songs is a story that is told verbally, but also with instruments. How loud, how fast, which instrument he chooses to play can affect how the mood and how the listener feels. So why do I think leaders and people should start thinking about storytelling with intention as they move forward? Our brains are wired for it. Research out of Princeton University has shown that the more connected a listener is to a story, the more their brainwaves sync with the storytellers, which I think is really cool. MRI scans show that many different parts of the brain light up when someone is listening to a story. Areas like language processing, which, seems obvious, right? We're listening to words, and so that part of the brain being activated makes sense. But also areas of the brain that we use to understand emotion, areas involved in movement, in making predictions. They're all activated at different parts of the story. The more emotional a person feels about a story, actually, the more their movement part of their brain is activated. There is even research showing that when a person hears a good story, they're more likely to repeat it, which can reinforce memory. Think about this. Do you hear a good story when you're out with friends and you come home? Do you repeat it to a significant other or a family member? Do you tell a friend? Each time you do that, the more likely you are to remember the story that was told. So all these things combine. It's a whole storytelling and listening is a whole body and brain experience, which in the end, if you're trying to get a point across, you're trying to win people over in a board meeting to make a decision, you're trying to show somebody a new way to look at the world. All these things really help to move those things along and create that perspective and connection between storyteller and listener. So now that we know why storytelling is important, there are some key things to keep in mind when we're starting to weave a story. And these are important because people automatically listen to it, like look for these things in a story. Um, we just automatically do it. Think about picking up a book. If it's missing a section, we often are like, oh, I'm not sure about that story. I felt like it was missing something. So when you have the opportunity to prepare, you want to make sure you include some of these steps. The first thing you need to ask when crafting your story is, who is your audience? The audience creates the base and direction of your story. It is an essential element to creating a story that is effective. If you don't think of your audience ahead of time, you can't make sure to take the steps and try to connect with your audience. You're not always going to connect, and that's okay. We'll get to that a little bit later. But it's moving with intention and mindfulness to connect, putting yourself in the listener's shoes. That's really important. Questions you can ask to get a sense of your audience are, who's going to be listening to the story? Super basic, but that's a good place to start. And then you can take it a step further. What are their wants and needs? Do they have specific interests? That gets you a little bit deeper and helps you, again, create that base to build a story on. And remember, you are the constant with different audiences, meaning that the audience can change, but you, the storyteller, will always be you. So at the end, to make sure that you are still connected to the story just as much as it's about the audience, right? It's two-sided. You need to connect to them as well. Ask, what connects you to? What connects you and the audience? And make sure that that is part of this story. Next, ask yourself, what are the parameters? This is basically context. Um, how long do you have to speak? I was just telling Katie before this that a lot of times I have to fit into a 30-minute slot when I'm giving a presentation, and this was 20 minutes, and I was like, oh, this is gonna kind of throw me off my game. I'm used to filling a 30-minute window. I better do a lot of practice here. So just even knowing that can alter how you're going to tell your story. Is it a casual environment? Is it structured? Are there rules you need to follow? I think of boardrooms with this. Will you be expected to use technology? And if you're using technology, what is it? And how can it be used to enhance your storytelling? Your story shifts to create a connection when you know the context or environment in which you will be storytelling. People do this automatically all the time. You do it. The same story you told a dear friend over dinner might look different when you tell it to a coworker at work. If the audience is unfamiliar, it could mean finding a story with a universal thread that everyone can relate to. And like I said, many of you, all of you do this anyway. You are going, when you're telling a story to a friend, it's going to look very different when you tell the same story to a child. Um, you're already shifting based on your audience as well as your environment. Topic. This is the tricky one for a lot of people. What story do you tell? Select something meaningful. I think this is of all this stuff on the slide and what I'm going to talk about, this is the most important because your passion will come through to your audience. This, again, you will hear me say connection like a million times, but being passionate and choosing something meaningful will make you authentic in your delivery, which is absolutely critical for creating connection to the listener. So, also remembering what's your goal? Is it for people to understand your viewpoint? Is it to get a donation to a nonprofit? Is it to partner with a new business in town? Concentrate on this while you craft your story. If you're not sure how or where to start, NPR actually has some great articles on how to tell a good story. I think they're broken down wonderfully. I've got some resources at the end that will include the names and links to some of these articles, but they outline 4 questions to ask, and I really liked them, so I wanted to pull them into this presentation. If your life were a movie, what's one scene you'll never forget? What's something someone said to you that you'll never forget? Tell us about that breakthrough moment. Tell us about a time when you had to follow your heart. So, when in doubt, keep your story short, but always well rounded. Start strong. Grab the audience's attention. If you're curious how to do this, start paying attention to the stories that you enjoy and see how they start. Do they start with a question, an emotional scene, or a shocking statistic or number? Think back to the start of this conversation. I wanted to get you guys in the mindset of thinking about stories and where stories are in your life. So I asked a lot of questions. And remember that a story is more than an anecdote or a scene. It's, again, getting that well rounded, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Basically, you're telling us how that moment felt emotionally, how you were affected, how you reacted, and how you're a different person after having endured that moment. You are telling us, what do you stand to gain or lose? Why is what happens in the story important to you? Again, not forgetting you in the story. A well rounded story shows a transformation, a change, a result. It's important to draw people into this timeline that this well rounded thing kind of feels like a timeline. It's important to draw people into this with senses. So, how does the story contain elements that help people engage their senses? If they were in the story, what would they see, smell, feel, hear, or taste? Obviously, all stories are going to involve all of these, but really helping people set the scene, helping people connect on that level, engaging that part of the brain that we were talking about earlier. So they're more likely to remember your story and remember you. And I think one thing that I I like to mention anytime I am talking about marketing, external relations, or any of that is to be kind to yourself. Because if you aren't, you're not going to be a good storyteller. It's going to be missing something. You want to get as much out of the storytelling as the audience and the listener. It is, again, this holistic, mindful, intentional connection. And if you aren't taking care of yourself, you aren't going to be making that connection. Make sure you are ready and okay to tell the story. This is really important when a story is very personal or makes you feel vulnerable. Really check yourself that you're ready to do that. And that might mean bringing in someone, a close friend, or somebody you trust, and giving your presentation and checking in on your feelings and how comfortable you're feeling. Also, it's okay to be nervous. Uh, this is like my mantra when I come into a speech. So, according to the University of Iowa, as well as many other resources, it's approximately 75% of people experience anxiety over public speaking. I try to remind myself of that when I step into a room. There is a good, very good chance that a majority of the people in that room would be nervous too. And then one of the great, for me, it's almost in the realm of self-care to me, is get your ideas down first and then edit. And don't judge yourself. Just get your ideas down. This is often like a bulleted list for me when I'm initially trying to create a story of all my ideas. I don't care if they're run on sentences. I don't care if I'm going to end up deleting half of it later. And I usually end up doing just that. But just removing your judgment and letting your creative side get involved in this story. You will get back to editing that and shaping it later. Also, very important, practice and learn. So, practice, practice, practice. Um, Very important part of doing a presentation. But you don't want to memorize because you want to know your story well enough that you can have fun. You can make eye contact. You can connect with your audience. You can improvise because we all know things don't always go to plan. So you have to be able to adapt and improvise. Maybe even though they're holding questions at the end, there is that person up front that just really wants to ask you a question, and you're going to do it. You're going to, call on that person, have them ask the question. And you need to be able to kind of adapt your story around those types of things. Learning from others. If you know somebody who is a good public speaker that you really like to connect with and go and listen to them talk, start asking them questions. Start asking them how they craft their story. It's mentorship. It's really important. I also really believe in trying to observe presentations and stories and all its different elements, all its different contexts and styles. Listen to podcasts, watch presentations online, attend board meetings. A lot of people don't think of that when they think of storytelling. Go to art shows and talk to the artist. Find the stories. Ask yourself, what stories am I drawn to? Do they have similarities? And then how can I pull those elements into my storytelling practices? I'm gonna go back, sorry. Through practice, observing different styles, and trying on a few of them yourself, you will find what feels good and authentic to you and your voice. When you are authentic, it shows, it shows. And the listener is more likely to connect, and you are going to be more comfortable sharing. So remember, again, that word I've used 100 times on this presentation. It is about connection. The story is how we connect. Connection is the goal. If the story connects with the audience, then their brain does those amazing things we were talking about. It's lighting up all over. The story gets repeated and people remember. So here are some of those resources that I talked about. I will, of course, give these to Katie for anybody who wants to reach out. But I really hope that you all feel inspired to go and start crafting some of your stories and thinking about how you do that every day, even in a boardroom. And yeah, it looks like the final slide here is that next week, please join us for navigating conflict. I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Katie for end questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Erica. We have some time here, so we'd love to get any questions that have come up as Erica was presenting. So thank you for that. As we give folks a minute to maybe get those questions in, Erica, I want to make a connection to connection's the word of the day
It is.
to last week's discussion was around group dynamics. So I'm thinking of how you could use storytelling, maybe in different phases, but particularly as a group comes together and is forming and still getting to know each other. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how you might use storytelling kind of at the beginning of a group coming together.
Yes. I think storytelling is a great way for people to basically start understanding each other and figuring out who the core, like, who is this person I'm sitting next to in this group that now we have to do this important thing together. Um, it can help you understand how that person approaches a challenge, and I think a great approach you can do is like an icebreaker. I don't necessarily have to call them icebreakers because I feel like they got a bad rap, but you can always present a question to a group like, when was a time you overcame a challenge?
Mm.
And then everybody in the group can, share in a storytelling format that, but it also gives you a really great way to see how everybody in your group approaches a challenge and then use that information as you build a team and be like, oh, that person looks like they have like great analytical thought process. Like that person looks like they really connect well with people. And it can really help you figure out where your strengths and maybe some of your gaps within your team can be.
Great. I love that. Using it as a way to, I heard in there, build relationships, but also kind of like assess and understand and like begin to see how do we fit together as a group of a bunch of different individuals. What do we look like as a whole? That's great. Thank you. Jennifer has a question, wondering if you had any resources or information on using storytelling for a program evaluation. She saw that recently and it sparked her curiosity. So thoughts on this?
Right. Information on using storytelling for program evaluation. So I'm going to just make an assumption, Jennifer, and you can hop on and tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm assuming it's presenting your evaluation in a storytelling format. All right. Thanks, Jennifer. Um, I don't, but I would imagine that it's very similar to a majority of storytelling and formats. So if you, not to be, that's kind of basic, but like Google the power of storytelling or storytelling. Uh, I think it was like data storytelling. I'm thinking programmatic evaluation. There's a lot of probably numbers and information that you have to get out in a way that people are going to care about it. And a lot of times it's called data storytelling. And there are just amazing scientists out there who this is what they do. And there are some good resources online. I can also put those together on a document and send them to Katie for anybody who is interested. I don't remember the names of the folks at the like in my brain right now, but there are some people that are doing amazing work in this.
Well, and I would add here, just maybe on the other side of that, Jennifer, ripple effects mapping is
Yeah.
an approach to evaluating, gathering impacts in evaluating programs. That's another thing you can just Google, or I'd be happy to talk with you further. MSU Extension earlier this year, well, I guess in September, we brought in some of our colleagues from Idaho and Washington to train us, and that's essentially an appreciative inquiry approach to understanding what kind of impacts programs have on folks. So we ask the question when we're ready to start capturing it on the wall is tell us a story. What did you all talk about as after we've given them some prompts in their groups? So it can be pretty powerful because you're not asking a question of how did this program impact your life? You know, that's very like extensionese or, you know, other, I know other organizations are on the phone, but asking that prompt, tell me a story, you can almost just see people relax and like, oh, there's less pressure. I'm just telling a story about, you know, what this means to me, this program or participation, etc. So, um,
I think it removes a barrier a lot of times when you approach it from a
yeah,
story standpoint. People can be like, "Oh, I can do that." I talk to people all the time. Like
yeah.
I can tell a story. Yeah,
And that's really powerful, right? If we can remove barriers for folks to be able to
very.
like engage and feel like they're part of something to be able to participate.
Yeah.
Thanks. I don't see any other questions. So, Erica, I'm gonna send one more to you here. You talked about using technology to enhance your story. Give us some tips. How might one do that?
Um, well, I am a fan of not a lot of words on a slide. Um, so I think having, if you, let's say, I'm just going to frame it in, you're giving a presentation, you got to do a PowerPoint, some sort of a slideshow, um, making it where only main points are on a slide. Your voice is what is engaging. Using visuals that are related to what you're talking about. I am a big fan of using photographs. And photographs for me, I've taken because again, I connect to them. I can see them and I can be like, oh, yeah, this was an amazing presentation I went to. I've got that picture of that person on there, and it helps me tell the story. But it also connects to people in the audience as well. It helps set that mood that we were talking about, and you know, visuals can really set emotional and sensory experiences. But what doesn't usually are a lot of words. So
Great. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions, and we are a minute to the top of the hour. So thank you all for being here. Erica, thank you for sharing your wisdom. We'll be back for our last in this series next week with Ashley Kent talking about navigating conflict. So we hope to see you next Tuesday morning. Stay well, stay warm. Thanks.